talk about. This is very significant article we are going to study. Where is Hope? Coetzee rewriting of Dante in Age of Iron. David E. Hoigberg. So let's start. Where is Hope? Coetzee rewriting of Age of Dante. Dante in Iron. Age of Iron. David E. Hoigberg. But tell me, if you can, what is to be for the situation of that divided state, and whether there are honest men among them, and for what reason we are torn by hate. Dante Inferno, Canto 6. In the textuality of the post-colonial author often involves rewriting and art critiquing work of European literature that have been used in colonial educational system as evidence of the superiority of European culture. By means of allusion and strategies revision, work like Jean Ray White, Sargasso C., J.M. Coetzee's Foe, and Derek Walcott, Omi Rose expose ways in which certain European texts function ideologically to promote racist and imperialist thinking. Newman 3 and 4. As Linda Hutchinson argues, however, every literary reworking contains a conservative element along with whatever critique it is making. The very act of parodying invest are both authority and the exchange value in relation to literary norm, so that the ambivalence set up between conservative repetition and revolutionary difference is part of the very paradoxical essence of parody. Hutchinson 77. In Coetzee 1990 novel Age of Iron, the white female narrator is a retired teacher of the classics with a moderately liberal political view, although she heads the repressive Afrikaner nationalist government. Right, in the ambivalent setup and very paradoxical, the very act of the very act of parodying invests with both authority. I think I missed somewhere. In Coetzee's 1990 novel Age of Iron, the female white narrator is retired teacher of a classics with moderately liberal political views. Although she has the repressive Afrikaner nationalist government, she has herself participated in the government's education system, and thus cannot avoid both the charge and awareness of her own complicity with apartheid. Terminal illness and journey yielding heightened awakened of black underclass cause her to re-examine both her politics and vast knowledge of classical literature and history. This re-examination brings to light conflicting impulse with her character, the tendency to retreat into familiar text and ideological structure, and the drive to comfort and confess her responsibility for the suffering of others. Both are figured in Coetzee's use of Dante's Commedia, which serves as one example of European high culture to be resisted and a model of self-examination and confession to be allowed. Other critics have looked at the parallels between Coetzee's Virgil and Dante's Virgil. In this essay, I will focus mainly on the episode in which Virgil does not appear but which nevertheless function overtly over a reworking of Dante's Inferno. I will argue that Coetzee accepts Dante's view of importance of direct experience in the process of self-examination and confession, but locates his main character's journey of discovery in Black Township in order to question the imperial vision that informs Dante's views of factionalism and civil war, presenting itself as a long letter from a dying woman to her expatriate daughter. Okay, now please remember this. It is significant. Presenting herself as a long letter from a dying woman to her expatriate daughter, The novel opens up on the day Mrs. Kurian learns that her bone cancer is terminal and comes home to find homeless man sleeping beside her garage. Mrs. Curran must simultaneously confront her own mortality, the unfamiliar world of South Africa's black underclass in a more direct and personal way that she has had to before. Faced with the certainty of the body extinction, she brings begins to think about the health of her soul and finds that it is not a private matter between herself or God, but it is bound with her a material and political space in South African society. She expects to be lumped with her other member of her race and class in the final reworking. If justice reigns at all, she writes, we middle class whites will find ourselves bare at the first threshold of the underworld, while as Gubs in eternal white arena mistook for weeping, a white our color, the color of limbo, undecided, indecisive, neither hot nor cold, neither fish nor fowl. Mrs. Curran's reference are picked up on the fact that Dante based his limbo of the indecisive soul on the area of unweaned infants in Virgil's underworld. Gods or history, she fears will judge those who refuse to take a sides in the racial warfare of South Africa as moral infants, grub still in their cocoon. I do not want to die in the state that I am, she writes, a state of ugliness. I want to be saved. How shall I be saved? By dying what I do not want to do, I must love, first of all, the unlovable. For Dante, everything depends on whether one dies in state of sin or represents sincerely both death. Those who repent, even if they wait until the last moment, guarantees themselves as a place in purgatory and eventually in heaven, although they may undergo additional punishment for making good weight. These musings on the afterlife establish that Coetzee is aware Dante's president and uses constructing Mrs. Kurian's spiritual journey. Gave Coetzee's concern in the novel, his use of Dante is an appropriate choice for several reasons. First of all, the reference of Dante's use Virgil in the above passage reminds us that Dante's work is already highly intertextual. The Commedia is on one level a poem about reading Virgil, but since it is also a Christian poem, Virgil's model must be transformed. Dante therefore exemplifies Hection's description of the paradoxical mixture of repetition and exemplifies Hection's description of paradoxical mixture of repetition and difference inherent in all parody. Second, the Commedia is a work in which the personal and the political are intertwined. Autobiographical details given in the poem shows that Dante's spiritual journey coined with his political career and exile from Florence. The spiritual journey takes place during Holy Week in year 1300. In Florence in May of that year, street fighting between the black guelphs and the white guelphs broke out. This period of a renewed black-white struggle was also the period when Dante, a moderate white guelph, was elected one of the prior or magistrate of the city, and it was this and other political activity that made him a target of the reprisals once the black took control of Florence in 1301. Dante was convicted in absentia of the corruption in office and sentenced to death. Dante was literally journey across Italy as a political exile. Then, while he was writing the poem about his journey through hell, purgatory and paradise, just as the maze-like dark wood of the opening canto is in the part and blood-darkened street of Florence, so the journey is in the part of discover causes and solution for civil war in Florence. Even this brief sketch hints the parallels between Dante, Florence and Coetzee's South Africa In late 1980s, when Age of Iron takes place, South Africa too was divided by renewed and heightened struggle between white and black. Though their terms indicate racial classification as well as political loyalties. Mrs. Curran's spiritual journey began in autumn 1986 when death sentence of sword is passed by her bodies by passed upon her doctor's announcement of the terminal cancer. In Mrs. Curran's spiritual journey began in autumn 1986 when a death sentence of sort is passed upon her by her doctor's announcement of terminal cancer. In June of the year, the nationwide state of emergency was declared by the nationalist government in response to 3 years of vigorous resistance to apartheid regime in every city and nearly homeland in country. Now this is also another development. In June that year, a nationwide state of emergency was declared by the nationalist government in response to 3 years of vigorous resistance to the apartheid regime in every city and nearly homeland in country. Thompson 229. And 1 month nearly unbridled welfare in the township and squatted camp near Mrs. Curran's Cape Town home. It makes sense that I think to say that increasing black militancy and white attempts at repression in this period were desperate measures heralding a kind of death sentence in white only. To Mrs. Curran's, life in this country is so much like that, like aboard a sinking ship. An image recalling Dante's declaration that Italy is a ship unpiloted in the storm's rage. Italy's a ship unpiloted in the storm's rage. Purgatoria. As historians Leonard Thompson put, by 1989, includable long-term process were undermining the prospects of South African regime. Thompson. Like Dante's journey, Mrs. Curran's is a search for personal salvation and for the way out of the national political crisis. The thought of the dying women are inseparable from the white liberal teacher witnessing the death throes of the regime that has governed, as she says, in her name, though not her approval. After another reason for Coetzee's choice of Dante is important to Doth, author of direct experience or witness as a means of spiritual education. As Beatrice says of Dante, he fell so far from every hope of bliss that every means of saving him has failed except to let see the depth. So Virgil was sent to guide Dante through the first two realms of afterlife. Direct experience is proposed to as the key to Dante's education and salvation. Though text can be important, Dante must do more than read Virgil's account of the underworld. He must see Christian afterlife for himself. Experience bring a type of knowledge to text can provide. His salvation depends on seeing the results of God, government, and travel beyond prescribed boundaries. Coetzee's novel also highlight the value of direct experience reading, as classical teachers Miss Curran has read widely but mainly within the boundaries of the European tradition. Likewise, her middle class life has kept her until now with the boundaries of her neighborhood and other area prescribed for white only in South Africa. Her classical training has given her a certain cynicism about the governmental rhetoric that makes her politically liberal, but has given her no actual knowledge of the black underworld. Furthermore, the time of her autobiographical writing coincide with the placing of severe restrictions on the representation of black protest and struggle in South African media. The 1986 national state of emergency in Cape Town, it had been in place since October of 1985. Prohibited all coverage of unrest by television and radio reports, and several severely curtailed newspaper coverage. As Miss Curran puts, of trouble in the school and radio says nothing. The television says nothing, the newspaper says nothing. In the world they protect, all children of the land are sitting happily at their desk learning about the square of the hypotenuse and parrot of Amazonian jungle. This media censorship means that just about the only way to give middle class white women a knowledge that may save her soul in is through direct experience. This is how Coetzee prepared for us most Dantean section of this novel. Mrs. Curian's journey into the black township of Guguletu to look for the son of her black housekeeper, appropriately named Florence. By journeying the witnessing of suffering of the others, the former educator will herself be educated. Coetzee marked the journey to Guguletu as a reworking of Dante by several means. The housekeeper's son, Becky, has, along with many black youth of the period, boycott the white run school in this township and become involved in struggle of liberation, while Florence receives a phone call saying that Becky is in trouble. Mrs. Curian offers her car and her assistant in searching for the boy. Florence's two daughters, Hope and Beauty, accompany them in car. It was like living in allegory, says Mrs. Curian. Once past the police blockage at the edge of Black Township, they leave Hope behind with a clear reference to the sign to the gate of Dante. I am the way into the city of woe. I am the way to forsaken people. I am the way into eternal sorrow. Sacred justice moved my architect. I was raised here by divine omnipotence, primordial love, and ultimate intellect. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Coetzee's city of woe is one of the many black townships that visits of horrendous poverty and vigorous unrest in this period. Dante's sign also claims, however, that sacred justice motivated the architect of the city of woe. Here the heroines of Coetzee rewriting begin to emerge, for Black Township appear to be product of justice only if one is fully immersed in apartheid ideology. Other illusions of Dante allows an unnamed black boy, 10-year-old at least most, at home in landscape of the violence. Coetzee's version of the heavenly message who lets Dante and Virgil into city of this. Mrs. Curian and other wade across a wide flat pond like crossing of the Archeon and come to a vast shanty down here. Miss Curian find a multitude people of gathering on the rim of amphitheater in dunes, signing as they watch a group of men systematically burning, chopping down their shanties. This amphitheater recalls the inwardly sloping circle of the infernal wide sighs and cries like sound Dante hear from the remand. The irony, of course, is that these are dead souls but living people, are forced to live without hope of prosperity or respect by complicated system of residency and employment laws that constitute apartheid. Simply to live in a shanty down of makeshift dwelling poor situation is a punishment in itself. But now even these sheikhs are being destroyed in this hell of human creation. A physical suffering is not an allegory of the future spiritual state but a brute fact. Who is architect of this justice? While the nationalist government may largely responsible, the historical event in which the episode is based tell a more complex story. Mrs. Curian is not witnessing some generic or invented township struggle but a specific current of Cape Town history. The destruction of scattered camps at Crossroad in May and June 1986. The political implications of Coetzee's Dante reference depends on the understanding of this event and its background. According to historian Josette Cole, systematic deconstruction of the shanty and the squatted camp known as the Crossroad complex adjacent to the Black Township, that is Guguletu, during May and June of 1986 resulted in the death of the estimated 100 people in the homeless for about 70,000. Cole notice it in page number 146. Although white security forces look on and in some case help, the bulk of the destruction was done by black loyal to the entrenched black leader of the old Crossroad. The target were the more military and political progressive black elements that commerce on the area, threaten the existing leadership and control of the source resources, that is coal, from page 123 and 117 to 156. Like South African as a whole, Crossroad was in state of local civil war. In sort of term, at least furthermore, the government interest in representing unified anti-apartheid resistance. Squatted camp themselves with the Crossroad complex was one of the largest of the South Africa, were results of the broader force in South African political economy. Since it rise to power, uh, one one main interest of the Nation Party had been to maintain a supply of the check labor of white-owned agriculture industry while attempting to curtail the social mixing of political instability that go along with the large residence of black population. As part of strategy to ensure continuity, all black were officially declared to be uh, citizens of various ethnic homeland allowed to reside. White South Africa only temporarily for the purpose of the working a job not reserved for white or or colored. Those black who were allowed to live near the major cities, and but these were seldom large enough to accommodate number of legal and illegal urban class. A squatted camp tended to form underdeveloped land adjacent existing black township to become center of unrest and anti-apartheid activities. The government's response to unrest of the mid-70s was to attempt to remove scattered to area more easily controlled by police. Residents of the Crossroad were resistance and policy removal won several. Repressive and concession between 1976 and 1984. This is Cole and Platsky Walker. As settlements grew, however, divisions developed between various faction weighing of the power in the squatted community. In particularly, says Cole, Crossroad residents were ruled by a local black authority which concerned itself more and more with its own material benefit and less with problem of the ordinary residents. As a result, social stratification in Crossroad became stark, while chairman and this is Nexo Bongwana and the local community official accumulated capital the ordinary residents suffer from. Nexo Bongwana allied himself with the United Democratic Front in order to resist further settlement attempt during the early month of 1985 when he was under arrest and trial. Politically progressive militant youth of the area began to assume more of the leadership when this role release was prison. Nexo Bongwana allied himself with the state of security force against the young militant and the UDF in order to try to regain his lost control of the region. The alliance between Nexo Bongwana and the government served interest. Nexo Bongwana followers for the white clothes they wore of identify themselves gained a virtually free hand and violence against their adversaries. The militant youth comrade like Baki and John in Novel and the state gained a ways to repress anti-government activity without the negative publicity and might accompany more over action. The most worst of the clash between with Doi and Comrade took place May 17 and June 10, 1986. The resultant near total defeat, the Comrade as well as home loss of the thousands living in area, Comrade used as base. According to eyewitness report, police and army troops protected in the same case. It was an alliance white authorities and black vigilance then been preserving customary privilege in the face of rising position, the young and the disaffected that produced Inferno witnessed by Mrs. Karyan. Coetzee structure Mrs. Karyan's journey as a series of discoveries through which the layers crossroad politics are progressively revealed. As we watch through Miss Karyan's eyes, we see how pressure of new experience exposes and undermines assumptions she brings from her sheltered life. Approaching the scene of devastation, for example, Mrs. Karyan registered a change in perception of the sound. A cry calls over a ground brass that I can only call a sigh, a deep sigh, repeated over and over as if the wide world itself were a sighing. What at first sound like natural phenomena, wind and rain, turns out upon closer examination to be caused by a human action and emotion. This passage allowed to one in which Dante, immediately after passing through the gate of hell, hears the cries of the opportunity. Voices, horses, and shrill the sounds of blows, all intermingle raise tumults and a pandemonium that still wilts on the air forever dirty with itself whirlwind sucked at scent. The common element is the comparison of the sound of human suffering to wind, and that it makes sense that punishment of sin should appear, where someone natural and inevitable an expression of sect. Coetzee's revised version of the Dante smile, however, disjoint, tender, and sound are similar enough to be confused. But to confuse them is a mistake that then correct. From a distance, the sound of the black conflict and suffering are indistinguishable from the natural sound of the storm. And Miss Currien's initial perception, black suffering, were natural and non-man made. Proximity, however, allows her to distinguish the two types of sound as if a veil of naturalizing rhetoric were being drawn aside. A similar revision takes place in Miss Currien's perception of the action in Amphitheatre. Gangs of men were at work trying to rescue the content of the burning shack, going from one to another, putting out the fire. And so I thought, till with a shock it came to me that these were no rescuers but incendiaries, that the battle I saw them waging was not with the flames but with the rain. Why uh, would why would Miss Currien, my Currien, think in the first place that the man she saw were rescuers? She does not identify them by race, but the historical sketch suggests that these are the Nexo Bongwanas, a black with Duik, carrying out their carefully planned and executed operation against the comrade. A Miscurian probably assumed that black in the area would be helping other black instead of attacking them. Such an assumption would derive from ignorance of division with black community and from a general belief in black solidarity. Once again, a close observation undermines her flawed assumption, but it leaves no new conceptual structure in the place. Miss Currien began to feel disoriented and longs to close out this looming world of the rage. Watching the man repulse a woman tries to desperately to go back in burning home make Mrs. Currien want to return her home. Not just because of her physical pain, but also because she feels I am out of place. Here she makes an ideological retreat to one of the key element apartheid, though the idea that there is a proper place for white and blacks and the each is out of place in the place of others. At this point, Mr. Thabane approached Mrs. Curran to comment on the scene. When you see a crime begin committed in front of your eyes, what do you do? Do you say, I have seen this, I didn't come to see sight, I want to go home? Thabane seems to want to black her ideological retreat by suggesting that what happened in black area is not just someone else's business but it's hers. In this, he is correct, but his point is complicated by the tactics he uses. While Thabane tries to maneuver Mrs. Curran's naming crime, she sees begin committing. She admits that destruction of the people home is to be condemned, but also complains that she is being interrogated under power struggle. It is trick one uses to make one's own answer seems to come from child. Ventriloquism, the legacy of Socrates and oppressive of Africa. The reference of Socrates reminds us that a spokesman of the comrade, as she phone conversation on the page 140 to 50. Mr. Thabane rightly condemned the action the which do Yet his support of the comrades need to be historically contextualized. According to several sources, the Crossroad youth groups were no less cruel and corrupt in their handling of local power than Negso Bongwana, an old Crossroad executive committee. Martin Murray writes, what seems to really exacerbate the intergeneral conflict was resentment over severity of the wanton punishment meted out to adult after politically affiliated Nayang Youth Brigade seemed assumed control over people. Nayang East and confirmation of Omego during 1985 consumed boycott when suspected boycott. Such actions, of course, do not justify the violence of youth opponents, but they do add to complexity of the moral. No one of this inferno seems immune and accusation of the opportunism, even dying women. Now that Mrs. Kurian has learned something about the black side in the Crossroads struggle, she discovered that state security forces have played a role as well. They reach buildings where Becky's body lies. Miss Tabane calls attention to the white presence hovering on the margins of the fighting. The boys are here to protect you, he says to Miss Kurian, while pointing towards three khaki brown troops carries almost merging into the trees and outlined against the key helmeted heads. In the case we're thinking, he concluded that this was just quarrel among black, a sport of fraction fighting. That troops are almost merging into the trees suggested a nearby successful attempts to camouflage their role in the struggle and to present fact fighting as a natural part of the black landscape. When Miss Kurian speaks directly to one of the white officers, the claim this unit hasn't fired a shot in 24 hours, thus nearly skirting the question of whether they have supplied weapon support them in other. Once again, historical sources give fuller picture. The South African police made a police using of the encouraging black. The climax of Miss Kurian's journey of education takes place appropriately in the burnt out building described as a horror school. There she gazed up dead bodies of Becky and four other youth comrades who are among the casualties of the crossroad. Becky still wore the grey flannel trousers, white shirt and maroon pullover, and his control with his feet were bare. Miss Kurian, must bodies lie here? Tabane replies, yes, they must lie there. The young man who can boycott the school now lies. He is what other come to witness and exhibit education. Work like Dante's would have been taught. The black body in all its particularity and solidarity has become the main text to be read and interpreted, displacing the text of Dante and other European classic. In this classroom where lessons of the poverty, oppression and violence are taught, Miss Kurian, then the former teacher is student, she writes, I thought this is the worst thing I have witnessed in my life, and I thought now my eyes are open and I can never close them again. Presumably her eyes are now open to human cost of apartheid and its a deformation of the human spirit. Miss Kurian is clearly unsettled and reshaped by her first-hand observation of the crossroad fighting, an experience she would have missed that she stayed within the safe white world. In the midst of the narration, however, Koizzi also highlights the problem of trying to repress direct experience of the text. Miss Kurian interprets the story to remind us that the white record of experience has already been immediate and structured her consciousness. If I tell you the story of this morning mindful form, office and place, it is through my eyes that see. The voice that speaks in your head is mine. Though me alone, do you find yourself or hear or desolate floods, smell and smoke in the air of the narrative. reminds us with cannot find ourselves here on these desolate flats in the any absolute scenes. The more the writing succeeds in drawing us and with the narrator and her value. Therefore, Miss Karin wants the reader her daughter. So I ask you attend to the writing, not to me. If lies and please and excuse wave among the world, listen to them, do not pass them over, do not forgive them, read all, even this adjourn with the cold eye. Although a text may say that direct experience is more valuable than reading, it cannot itself supply value experience. Coetzee makes this a noble point beyond itself, inviting the reader to ask how even the story in which experience force an author to rethink ideology might be ideologically motivated. Even without each overt reminder from the narrator, there could be room for question about the directness of the experience narrate, since the allusion do Date give entire episode. A self-consciously literary quality, our experience of miscurrents experience is that immediate that mediate not only by the act of reading but also our knowledge. Coetzee has constructed is according to the pre-existing literary model. At the same time, our knowledge that there are real devastating events at the heart of the story kept the novel firmly rooted in history despite its self-doubt. While Coetzee makes even Crossroad 1986 centers of the Miscarian Center Dantean journey, the situation recalls the condition of Florence in November 1301. The black Guelphs called in the outside help of Charles of Valois to drive white out of the city, destroy their homes. More broadly, the many conflict between Guelphs and Ghibellines, black and white Florence history prompted Dante to compare the city in a sick man who cannot rest through the feather bed. By time he wrote comedian, Dante was disenchanted with all parties long to form. To journey the crossroad height 1986 fightings like to enter a maze of the cross lines. How could I get from this terrible place? And the willingness of all interested parties to engage in violence, how little weight appeal to non-violent activities carried. At the same time, it has seemed that the crossroad was emblem of the entire South African racial struggle to come. Then hope for peaceful and human transition of something beyond apartheid has indeed been left behind. Despite the Dantean structure of Mrs. Currien's journey and the parallel between civil war in South Africa and Florence, however, Coetzee is not endorsing Dante's imperial politics. For Dante, the way out of Florentine libertine, the violence was to call secular empire strong that it would overpower transcendent of local and recent conflict, a concept of imperial power to which Dante was guided by his reading of Virgil. Just Augustine reigned the put an end to 100 years of civil war in Rome. So, rise of the new empire depends on papal authority. Dante's hope could end the factionalism and civil strife regime in Florence and throughout Italy. Characteristically, Coetzee refuses a transcendental solution to the problem in South Africa. One way he signal this, problematizing the figure of the guide and reliance authority, whereas Dante led into of Inferno and Great Expectation implicitly trust all high Christians. Okay. So Miss Currien's guide into Crossroad by Florence and Mr. Tabane, but left to find her own way out of maze. After getting lost in suburbs, she takes her way to Woor Tracker Road and then home. There's a reference to the finding myth of Afrikaner nationalism, illustrate not a way out of current crisis but one of chief cause. As Miss Curran observed earlier in the novel, the woodpecker had produced generations of tight-lipped Afrikaner children, marching, signing their patriotic hymn, saluting their flag, vowing to die for their fatherland, and was now model for the dogmatist witch hunt of both armies. Appropriately, then, Woodtracker Road does not lead Miss Curran away from the violence of Cross Road. A few days later, the incident is reenacted in a miniature in her own home. She watches the police remove the comrades squatted John Florence room and Miss Curran. There is no reliable guide and no return home to prove structure of authority. The scene in that ruined school neatly symbolized Coetzee's intertextual strategy with regard of Dante, just as the wall of building remain, but now house a very different sort of education experience. So Coetzee makes the structure of Dante as journey recognizable but replaced by content instead of specifically Christian or Western series of revelation. Miss Curran learn about the politics and human cross of the crossroad in very place where the government control a media have depicted the colonial discussion of the Dante's Divine Comedy and some other colonial Western texts taking place between benevolent teachers and dutiful students. Coetzee's places Black Corpus. He dismantled the traditional classroom, making it place where transition and not enforced. Coetzee rewrites Dante not only to locate us in South Africa and Florence, but also question the nostalgic imperial of the heart of Dante's theory of history. Exactly what lesson Miss Curran ultimately draws from her educational journey are not so clear. It takes out of her comfortable wide zone and she never able to feel quite at home there again. She dreams of making a flamboyant gesture of protest and government, but settled for a gradual decline into a drug-induced lethargy. She becomes more confessional, admitting and that does not love John because she does not want to love him enough to love him despite myself. The most positive aspect of her post journey life is the growing intimacy between herself and Berkewil, suggesting that the best of a future is South Africa lies in personal and incremental growth and myth of the global salvation. Coetzee does not offer transcendental solution, yet Age of Iron is still partially the spirit of Dante in its valuing of the direct experience and the lament over the problem of factionalism and civil war. In the final analysis, Coetzee parody of Dante is ambivalent in the sense outlined by Linda Hachioun, since it is characterized by both repetition and difference, while the narrative shows the value of travel outside what racial territory of European ideological space. The illusions show the value of knowing the European source text. Coetzee is using revising Age of Iron, thus construct as to reward the reader's ability to move among different perspectives and bodies of knowledge and current to the ancient and black ownership of the Western classics. So you just read this and listen it again, and I hope you will understand it. So what are these significant aspects we can actually find here? These are the notes in this essay. White, a classic, Coetzee discusses similar ambivalence in this introduction to J.S. Bash music. He asks, is there some non-vacuous sense in which I can say the spirit of the Bash was speaking to me across the age, across the sea, putting me before the idea of form, and was what really going on, what moment that I symbolically electing the high European culture as root and take my classic position in white South African society. Most notably, Shala Robert, in her 1996 article, Robert argues that Berkewil is modified version of the Dante's virtual and that Coetzee Dante parallel to expose the political irrelevance. The most existing general discussion of the novel by Attridge and Gallagher, Maria and Coetzee's own comment of the novel interviews with David Atwood. So we finish here. You again try to listen it, and this is how this this whole article is talking about how she comes from the safe white zone, and she was ignorant enough about the black world. So our understanding about the black world, black colony uh, was not appropriate, and that's how she gets into this realm of violence and these black colonies. And finally, then she realized that how this Afrikaner nationalist government, or the government, was so lopsided, and that's how the education system was also not helping. So I end up here. You listen it again, write me a comment.